Hello, this is Jared. I'm playing Oxygen Not Included, and this is my Moonlet playthrough on cycle 347. I've just sent a rocket. This is the first rocket that's going to this frozen asteroid. So those two dupes are on their way there. Meanwhile, in the Desolens that has the oil biome, I'm specifying a place where water is going to be dropped and can be opened. So the payloads of water that I arrive from my homeworld will go here, and it's going to go to the oil well as well as oxygen in the washrooms. In the homeworld, I'm having the drop-up location for plastic moved over so that dupes don't have to go inside this area. They can just go to the industrial zone to pick up new plastic. So my dupes have just about arrived to the outside of the frozen asteroid. So once they get there, actually, it looks like the animation is wrong. The rocket is really there on the left, even though it is, so I just deployed some material to it and the rocket slid over. Okay, anyway, whatever. So inside that, I'm going to look for the schedule for Artis. They're the one that's going to land. It looks like they are about midday, so I'm going to wait until morning for them to go down. I'm building a water sieve in the Desolens, and that's going to convert the polluted water that's coming out of the washroom. Now, that has been sitting in chlorine, so it doesn't have food poisoning, but that'll allow me to use that water for the oil well, as well as the washroom and oxygen. So I've made a video of landing on a new planetoid that doesn't have a rocket platform several times before, so I'm going to go through this pretty quick, doing a backup there just in case I need to go back. Again, choose a location that has access to lead next to it, so I can destroy the Trailblazer. I can open up 2 payloads. This time, for some reason, I have to go to 3. It looks like one of the lead containers was actually empty, and that is really bizarre, but whatever. I open up a 3rd one, and I ultimately get my rocket platform that allows me to send the rocket down. A ladder allows the dupes go in and out of it. The rocket platform has oxygen, so they can survive. I'm just now in the process of going inside this new frozen world, and I've got to do a little bit of drywall, but once I'm in there, the first priority is going to be producing oxygen. Starting off with stairs that can go up and down, and now putting in a flooring area where I can put in a oxygen diffuser, the battery, and the manual generator, so I can get a little bit of oxygen produced in this area. So this is in the inverted asteroid, that is the hot magma is on the top versus the bottom, building wires so that it can connect to the atmosuits that are at the top of those base. Also starting to send over some material. So I'm going to start off with some atmosuits so the dupe over there can start digging up and get to the top of the surface without burning to death. Here I'm putting in a cooling system on the oxygen system because that's starting to take up heat. You notice that the oil well down there has cooled off pretty well, but I'm eventually going to continually get more and more heat from the electrolyzer that's here. So putting in some radiant pipes and just connecting that with regular pipes rather. And that's going to go to the polluted water system that's filtering around being cooled off by the aqua tuner. So over time, that electrolyzer isn't going to overheat everything. So you may just notice I'm going a little bit quicker in this video, and that's just because a lot of the same things are happening in some of the other asteroids. And the further you get in Oxygen Not Included, the larger some of those projects that you intend to do are. So instead of going at a snail's pace and explaining the same thing again and again, maybe I'll just try speeding things up. So here, just giving out some suits, snazzy suits, to some of the dupes that are still in the home world. So I've got a barracks for my 2 dupes. That's going to give them a little bit of a morale bonus. I'm going to now build, or aim to build, a great hall. So initially it'll start as a mess hall. And then when I can get some decorations, I may need, because I probably can't plant anything in this cold zone, I may need to get one of the dupes to be an artist to temporarily be able to create something to make that a great hall. In the Desolens, just connecting up this system that's going to send the polluted water, that's the temperature control system for this base, to the electrolyzer system. So in the inverted world, I'm sending an atmosuit over, and that's going to be put in the atmosuit station so that a dupe can dig on top of the inverted world and get to the top. Now, in order to do that, I want to have the area that I'm digging up into the bisylite and a little bit of sand that's up there, I want to make sure that's a vacuum. So I'm going to make a pump in there and pump out the excess oxygen so I get a vacuum before the dupe starts digging up. So I'm going to dig down to displace some of the water that I've got over here, and I'm going to dig a spot on the right for food preparation area. And I actually want to block off this spot to the left because that actually is accessing space further over, and I don't want to lose all my oxygen. Currently don't have a washroom, so dupes are currently making a mess, but food is a priority, so I'm going to get together a micro musher and turn water to dirt into food, because I'm not going to be able to grow anything. Ultimately, I want to grow food, get food from the pips, but I'm not ready for that, so I need to get a micro musher in there. And mealwood probably isn't going to happen since it's so freaking cold in this spot. On the other side of the micro musher, I'm going to put a latrine, so my dupes have a spot to use the washroom and get a little bit of a morale bonus when they go in there. Where I'm trying to vent oxygen over here is too overpressured, so I'm going to have to build a path for this ventilation to go down and push that to get it out of that area to create a vacuum. I'm not showing everything that I'm digging out, but just pointing out the dupes that are in Desolens have been continually digging out lead and a little bit of fossil, but primarily looking for lots of lead. And that's going to go towards the system that's going to collect wild Sleet Wheat once I eventually get those planted with pips. Just building a spot underneath here for a stable. That's where the pips are going to be, and ultimately they're going to produce eggs. I'm probably going to use omelets as food rather than barbecue meat, just because I do not want to bother running incubator system, and omelets is going to be good enough food for my dupes at this point. Underneath the stable, I'm building out a spot for some water to fill, and I'm going to use that polluted water. But ultimately, I'm going to use this for heating. I'm going to use that for a liquid heating system because I want to get the temperature up here. I'm going to obviously put insulation underneath it. Okay, made a mistake. I really wanted to bring glass with me, and I intended to bring that, and I don't know how I forgot that. I did produce the glass in the homeworld. I forgot to put it in my rocket. So I can't build solar panels, so notice their astronaut has been on the manual generator. So the first priority is to bring glass to my homeworld. This interplanetary launcher is being fed water, so I'm going to stop water going into it, get my dupes to load in glass. I have to turn this system off so they can safely go in there, not be hit by red bolts. And so quite disappointed about that, but oh well, it'll eventually get there. Still can't get a vacuum created in that inverted world. That's because even this spot is overpressured, so I'm going to get a gas reservoir, and that should handle it. So just putting together the pieces, polluted water is going to drop down, putting a door and a little bit of automation lights for the stable and the grooming station. But I must admit, this world has a lot more holes in it than I had anticipated. And that's going to make it a little bit difficult when I go to plant some wild plants. I could either bring in a lot of water and start freezing it, or may just have to get creative where I decide to put that. But anyway, not worried about that at the moment, just worried about temperature control. So notice that I've got this system to heat up water, and ultimately I'll put in pipes that gets up to the top of the base. I don't want to heat up the asteroid, I just want to heat up the living area. So ultimately going to put an insulation underneath it because I want to keep the rest of the asteroid cold. I'm watching a mix of water and glass be sent to this world, and I've got a system to direct where that lands, and I'm just manually turning this on and off to conserve power. Really wishing I had manually brought glass with me in the rocket. For a little bit of good news in the verted world, I finally have a vacuum area. So now I can actually safely dig up from this point and not worry about dupes being exposed to extreme heat. So that's a positive thing. I'm also going to upgrade the wires here to heavy watt because ultimately when I get up there, I'm going to be able to build things like solar panels and even steam turbines generating a lot of power. When my glass does arrive, I want an easy way to be able to open it up and get it accessible to this world to build some solar panels. One of the dupes is going to need the Metatronics skill to build some of this conveyor rails and whatnot, so I'll give it to one of those, but I'll have to make sure that they go through the skill scrubber so they don't get stressed out, because I don't have a lot of ability to give my dupes a morale bonus, at least at this point in time on this asteroid. So this is the insulation I was talking about underneath it. This is going to keep the rest of the asteroid below cold. I want it cold so I can grow some sleet wheat here. So just realizing I put a cooling system for electrolyzer on the Desolans. I haven't done that in the home world. So again, same thing, radiant pipes. And now I'm going to have the salt water that is acting as the base cooling system go through here. So that's just going to maintain the temperatures of those electrolyzers. Okay, at this point I have a big realization. And just fixing up the Great Hall there and building more beds, because I'm going to bring more people to the inverted world. And I'm actually going to abandon the frozen world. And the reason for this is because I actually want to grow the sleet wheat here instead of the frozen world. So why am I making this change? The reason for that is primarily, well, first of all, this world is actually quite well equipped to be able to grow sleet wheat. It is actually quite cold, despite the fact that it's supposed to be the hot world. It's not really a hot world, it just has hot magma on top of it with abyssalite. The rest of the world is actually quite cold. And it's also bigger than the frozen asteroid. The frozen asteroid is about 300 some tiles wide, and this one is 500. But it's probably the biggest reason is the teleportation. I'm having a hard time getting glass here, and I need to get a lot more than glass. Now, I may not have a hard time doing this when I get a nuclear power plant and get a lot of red bolts, but that's just not the case at the moment. I can send rockets there. That's just more difficult. I can very easily, now when you notice here, I'm sending over some material to the inverted world. I'll go over all the things that I'm sending, but I'm starting with pip eggs because I want some pips there. I was easily able to, actually that's the one thing that I can't bring over to the inverted world via teleportation, because you can't teleport a pip. You can put one in a rocket and send it to the cold world, but you can easily put a critter egg in and just wait for it to hatch on the other side. Okay, so this changes things a lot. I think it's going to make it a lot easier to do, primarily because I can teleport a lot of stuff, water, materials, all the materials, steel, ceramic, anything I need. So what I'm doing here is I'm building a pump with carbon dioxide, because my rocket actually can't make it back at the moment. This was a one-way trip, fuel-wise speaking. So actually cleaner now. So I've got one dupe over in the inverted world. Cleaner is going over. And I'm going to slowly bring more and more dupes over to the inverted world. I'll set up a greater living area, perhaps with a nature reserve, and get them to start the process of building a spot where lots and lots of wild sleet wheat will be growing. Okay, so I don't think it's a waste of the base that I've set up in the cold world, because I eventually do want to go back and do some things there. Probably I'll have Red Bull engines at that point and basically ignore that. So because I'm going to have more dupes here, I want a higher quality of living. So I've noticed I've got not a lot of wild plants. When those pip eggs become pips, that'll probably be solved. But I'm very carefully building out a spot. I want 64 tiles with 4 wild plants and a spot for the dupes to be able to walk through, so that they get a 6 morale bonus when they go through that. So just doing all the work there. Now my plan for the Desolans is to actually send the dupes back. But before these 2 dupes go back, I want lots of lead to be stored in that rocket. Now I've got a vacuum area inside that rocket, and as well I'm going to have a little bit of fossil and iron nets there. Okay, so this base that I've got here in the cold world is initial start. It's great, but as I mentioned, it's more important to focus on food, the sleet wheat in my mind, And because I'm not actually going to be planting sleet wheat here after all, I need to have one of the dupes have the piloting skills so they can actually leave. But I'm going to have them fly home and get them to teleport to the inverted world and start the process of planning or digging out some spots for some sleet wheat, and then eventually getting the pips over there to do that. Might as well connect that with water and start sending water back to the Desolands from the homeworld and get rid of that glass system, because I'm not going to be needing it there anytime soon, at least. Okay, so now I am completely changing focus, as I mentioned, to the inverted world. And this is quite nice, primarily because I have teleportation. It's much easier to send materials to this world. It's also easier to send a large number of dupes. So I've got a park, but that's just because I've got 3 wild plants. They're just going to look to see if I connect to another one, so that all the dupes here, I might actually send 5 or 6 dupes here. So it's going to be important in my mind to do this. Now, because of the fact that I have got to dig out in this spot, I have to be very creative about how I put this room together. It's going to be oddly shaped. My dupes aren't actually going to be walking through most of it, or won't be able to walk through most of it. That's not a problem. As long as their tiles all connect and you're not more than 64 and you got 4 wild plants, it is technically a nature reserve. But let's get that created. Okay, so this is the real start of the sleet wheat system. That's the wild sleet wheats that are going to be planting. So what I need to do is I need to have rooms of 4 tiles wide or tall, and I'm going to plant. There's a couple, two main options I typically do with wild plants. You can either put them side by side, or you could put them 3 by 3. But I prefer doing the 3 by 3 method. And the reason for that is you can put an auto sweeper in between, and they'll be able to access 3 plants on either side. So that's what I'm doing here. I noticed that I've got some tiles. That's where the plants are not going to be. And the spots in between, that's where I either have natural tiles that pips will be able to plant. Oh, 2 dupes stuck up there. Oh no, they're not actually stuck. So what I'm going to do is get the pips to put in the tiles that exist, and where tiles don't exist, I'm going to bring in some water, freeze it so that turns to ice. And either way, sleet wheat will be able to be planted in those 3 tiles. So basically 3 tiles of wild plants, 3 tiles of nothing, and then 3 tiles of wild plants. And then I'm going to go down and pretty much repeat that entire process. And the only exception will be where there are certain buildings, like the entropy killing system, which I'm actually not even needing at the moment anyway. I might use that later on. Or geysers. I obviously can't build through geysers, but anywhere else I'll put in that system. So I'm not going to show every material that I bring over to the world, but I'm bringing plastic, I'm bringing steel, I'm bringing ceramic, all the things I would potentially need. So, and I've got to set up to be able to get my dupes to specify exactly how much material and of what type. And as soon as I dump that on the floor, the auto sweeper will start sending it over there. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to show everything, but this is how basically everything is produced in the home world and just being sent over to that inverted world. In the inverted asteroid, you'll actually find quite a bit of water on the bottom of it. Now, you need 800 kilograms of water if you want to freeze it and get it to turn to a tile instead of individual like ice blocks that the dupes can pick up. So making sure I have at least that before I destroy a liquid vent. I'm keeping my eyes on the teleportation system. Artist is back from the cold world, and they'll be the next dupe to go over here. So now I've got 3 dupes here building this system. Continuing the water vents. Again, this is usually going up to 1,000. I could, if you're careful, you could notice that it goes above 800 and destroy it right away, but that is that. Now, I want to freeze that ice, so I've got to have an aqua tuner, and I need a system to be able to cool it. So just choosing a spot potentially to build that system here, and then I'm going to work with the Bissolite. So I want to have the Bissolite underneath the steam turbine, so that the steam underneath it doesn't go up and excessively overheat
the water that'll eventually be on top of that steam turbine. Though it will get hot just with the steam turbine itself running, so we'll have to cool the top of the steam turbine as any other steam turbine would. So again, just bringing over more material. This time, I just bringing over ceramic. So the spot I built a steam turbine that's going to cool off the liquid and eventually freeze ice wasn't big enough. So moving over here instead, where I also have some bisylite, and I'm just going to have the steam turbines. I'm going to make insulated pipes, again, out of ceramic, as I have with other systems. So this is going to be very similar to what I have, and I'm going to aim to have a vacuum covering all around the steam area so that the heat from that doesn't bleed into the rest of the base. Now, one difference here is I'm actually putting a door that I can open and close. I'm going to have it initially opened. The pump is going to pump out all the air because I want to vacuum in there, that area, before I turn it on. And start to have water fill in that spot. So once I created that vacuum, I can then close the door, and that door will then permanently be closed while it operates. So here I'm bringing in the power that's going to power both the pump, the aqua tuner. I've got to have power to the steam turbines as well. I'm going to start to seal off the area underneath it. I'm going to look to get rid of all the excess of smaller wires because I don't want to be losing material when the wattage goes much higher. Especially that'll easily happen when at least one aqua tuner turns on. So I haven't turned the pump on yet. Actually, it doesn't have the exit ventilation system, but the reason for that is because it's not sealed. I want to make sure I have this area fully sealed. Otherwise, I'll never actually create a vacuum. Okay, back in the home world, I'm connecting the saltwater system that is doing the cooling to the path that goes around the electrolyzers to make sure those don't heat up. Need 2 liquid bridges to complete that. So now that I've got some plastic in this swirl, I can actually use a high pressured vent so I don't have to circle a vent in multiple places or build a gas reservoir as I did in the top of this world. So again, just sealing it up. When that is fully sealed, I can get that pump starting to create a vacuum inside there. So that is that's going to be set up to be able to cool off the liquid that I have that's ultimately going to be aiming to create ice and maintain the temperature of this most of the spot to be under 5 degrees because that is what I need for sleet wheat to grow. It can't grow if it's above 5 degrees. So up here I've got the first floor of sleet wheat. Wherever I don't have tiles that fit my 3x3 plan, I've filled that with water, and I have at least 800 kilograms. I'm getting some excessive water to be mopped up because I can actually have that dropped off and put in the pump to be able to load in some other spots. And I'm going to go down to the next floor and then start over. So notice here in this homeworld I destroyed a pipe, so of course I've got some salt water to do, and just bringing over more materials, in this case lead. Now I'm not going to bring in the pipes for cooling yet, so I'll worry about that later. Also, wherever I have sand is something that technically I can have the pips plant something into, but because if I ever dig underneath it, it'll go away. I'm choosing to dig up any bit of sand and replace that with water. Okay, so this is an exciting moment. I'm actually digging up, and I've got a nice straight path up. That's not always the case in this world, but this is quite nice. Now here what I'm doing, I'm making sure I fill in any areas so I don't break the vacuum. If you break the vacuum inside there, what is going to happen is going to interact with the really hot temperatures and show up at the tiles on the bottom of the space. That water that's down there could even turn to steam. It'll just basically heat everything up. Okay, so on the second floor of this system, that's going to have wild sleet wheat growing. So I'm not working at the moment for turning that into ice. I'm just worrying about filling it with water, and we'll do the cooling later on. So that can be that can have multiple liquid vents in this spot fill all of that. And anything that's inside that water, if you freeze it, oh, okay, let me get back to that. A little bit of a problem over here. The sand, that hot sand has fallen. And what I should have done is put a airflow tile or mesh tile underneath it. Because if I did that, any future sand or any other material that falls on it will actually have a vacuum underneath it and not be interacting with my base. So I'm going to take on a little bit of heat here. I'm going to build one on the left because I actually want to have a fire pole there. So I'm going to be digging materials. So if it was bad enough, I might think to load back and put those airflow tiles in first. But I think we can live with that. Okay, my dupes in the home world, I'm slowly bringing them over to the inverted world so they can set up this Sleet Wheat system. Because ultimately I want to grow some pepper bread, and Sleet Wheat is one of the ingredients I need for that. But I'm having my dupes in the home world, in addition to send materials to the inverted world, I'm having them work on the nuclear power plant. That is probably going to take quite a while to set up. But if they've got nothing else to do, I might as well get them to start that process. But I'm having glass sent over to the invert world because when I get to the top, I can build some solar panels. So now I'm having heavy watt wires go up to the top of this base because ultimately, and I'm going to actually have another Atmos suit create it so more dupes can work in this area. But as I mentioned, I'm going to have the solar panels up there. That's going to bring power down to this space because I'm going to run an aqua tuner to freeze things. So I'll need a lot of power for that. I'm going to start to have more dupes show up in this world over here. So I'm building a spot to store food so that I can send food over there and have it stored. It may not necessarily last forever, but what I'm going to do over here is have a ration box. Tell my dupes to bring in about 4 kilograms of barbecue meat. So the dupe can drop it off there and I can have it sent over or teleport it to this world. And my dupes can rely on food. So the dupes over here don't actually have to grow food, which is great. They can just concentrate on this huge Sleet Wheat process of getting wild plants together. Alright, so just digging around this steam turbine because I'm going to have water put on top of it. I'm going to have a liquid shut off so I can control exactly how much water goes above it and inside of it so that that can operate in such a way that it won't overheat. Okay, as I mentioned, closely watching the teleportation system as soon as it is recharged, sending another dupe over. This time Astronaut is going to go over and I'll have 4 dupes over there to start building this huge system. So I need quite a bit of Sleet Wheat tiles if I want to have wild Sleet Wheat. And the nice advantage of wild plants is the fact that they don't take resources, nor do they take farmers' time in digging them, especially if I have automation actually pushing them out to where they need to go. The only real manual, oh, some dupes are trapped. They built some solar panels, so we'll fix that. So giving dupes that arrive over here the ability of carrying and digging, I think that's the primarily 2 skills that they'll need. Later on, I might give them some building skills. Okay, so I'm started to create some solar panels, but I also want to have steam turbines that are taking heat from that hot magma. But before I do that, I'm worried about them overheating. So I'm having a separate steam turbine with an aqua tuner that's going to cool liquid on top of it. So I'm actually have 2 aqua tuners ultimately running over here. One just to keep the tops of some steam turbines cool, and the one inside the base that is going to do the freezing for the actual Sleet Wheat. Okay, so I'm destroying the liquid vents whenever they are finished and cleaning up the material that is inside the water, because if I freeze that they will become buried objects and I will never have access to them again. So just watch that if you're building this system. So this is the steam turbine with the aqua tuner that will eventually be underneath it, and that, as I mentioned, will cool off that the steam turbines that are running. I'm going to need water, so bringing up water to this area so I can put it on top of the steam turbine and put a lot of water underneath it. Again, a liquid shut off to control exactly how much goes in each of those two places. So whenever I have a system of the aquatuner and steam turbines, I generally will have a liquid reservoir underneath or somewhere nearby with a temperature gauge with a pipe going out of that. And that's going to look at the temperature of the water and determine whether, or whatever liquid I'm going to be freezing, and determine whether that liquid needs to go through the aquatuner or skip it based on if it's too hot or not. Okay, just quickly realize that the 4 dupes here, only half of them are able to actually eat at the Great Hall, so bringing in more mess tables for them, so they all get the morale bonus. Okay, so this is a rocket that is in the Desolence. It's even though I'm storing the lead and fossil inside that vacuum on the bottom right, which means the temperature is not interacting with the rocket. It would actually be much hotter, probably closer to 70 degrees if I didn't do that. But because I've got a lot of machinery running, the auto sweeper and that's been running continually, that heat has heated up the rocket quite a bit. So what I'm going to do, I already have a cooling line with the polluted water that's going around the base. So I'm just going to have that go in and out of this rocket and go around the rocket to ultimately bring that temperature down. Because I want my dupes not to pass out when they fly back home. So here I'm digging out a spot for steam turbines, and I need to have a spot underneath it with a vacuum. Now, because I'm up in space, this is actually quite easy to do because Space Natural has a vacuum. And what I want to do is have a flat area with abyssalite to build the steam turbine. So this looks like an excellent spot over here. So now I'm watching the polluted water line go in and around the inside of the rocket. I didn't make that out of radiant pipes, but if it runs long enough, and it's great, it's granite pipes, so it shouldn't take too long to take the temperature down. And I don't really need it to be a comfortable 20 degrees, even if I get it down to 30, 35 degrees. It'd be good enough for a flight home. It's currently around actually 70 degrees. That could it's a little bit hotter than I thought, and that could just be the fact that the iron and lead does sit inside the spot before the auto sweeper gets to it. But I'll definitely get the temperature down, and the very hot material in the vacuum area won't continually heat up because, well, it's in a vacuum area at the moment. So the steam turbine system may take a little bit to operate. So what I'm doing here is I'm just, because I've got a little bit of glass, I'm going to bring it over some more in the home world, starting the solar panel system that's going to sit on top of this and continue that to go left. So I'm actually out of sand, which means I can't produce any more glass, as well as operate the polluted water oxygen system. So I'm no longer going to send any more polluted water in that system and completely rely on regular water. But fortunately, there's quite a bit of sand in random spots in this base, so it shouldn't have too much trouble finding sand for that. Now, if I also produce some little bit of salt, table salt, in the process, I can get a bit of sand as well. But as I mentioned, there's still quite a bit. So I'm going to start digging out that. And hopefully with turning off the polluted water oxygen system, I'll stop burning through it as quickly. So here I have another floor that I'm building. This is going to be for Sleet Wheat. Again, same principle, 3 wild plants, 3 tiles, 3 wild plants. The only difference here, I'm building a ladder so they can go up and down. I'm going to build that in a spot where tiles exist, where wild plants will not. The only difference here, as I mentioned, I will go, this will be a little bit wider than the 2 above it. Other than that, it's pretty much identical. Now, wherever I have abyssalite, I'm going to treat that, the pips can't plant anything in that, so I'm going to dig that up and put water inside of it. As well as wherever I see sand, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to title this episode Change Plans. I'm still going to grow sleet wheat and ultimately aim to grow or produce pepper bread. But instead of growing it in this frozen asteroid, which I thought would be a natural choice, you've seen, I'm going to grow it in the inverted world instead. And the reasons for that I mentioned, but it's bigger. It is also frozen, but it's the teleportation ability. The fact that I can send dupes there very easily. I don't have to build a rocket on one-way trip without worrying about fueling, send them back. I also can send material, quite a bit of material, over there with interplanetary launcher without a great source of red bolts, which I currently don't have. It's just going to take a lot of time to send all the stuff to do that. And one of the major resources is actually water, because this asteroid, I've been on the frozen asteroid before, and I didn't have nearly as many holes in that. This asteroid just has a lot of random cutout spots, which is just going to make it difficult as I cut out and try to find ideal spots to grow wild plants. So quite happy about that. The other thing I'm just going to mention that I'm speeding things up a little bit because I have a smaller set of larger projects. I just don't think it makes sense to show all the micro details, especially when a lot of them are similar things that I've done in the past. Either way, I still am going to get my huge system of Sleet Wheat that's going to support 20 dupes. If you want to see that and see my nuclear power plant that has started and some of the other larger projects, like, subscribe, and see you in a future episode.